Hello everyone and welcome to another lesson. I'm very happy to have you here with me today. Today we have a very important lesson. I'll go you with some of the most essential nodes inside of n8n. In case you're starting out, this will be a great way for you to understand the basic nodes that you would need to know in order to master create most of the workflows that you will be doing when starting out. But before, I want to encourage you to join my community here on Skool. In case you haven't, I'll put the link in the description below. So let's go ahead and get started. So before I start going through these nodes, I want to explain a little bit on how n8n works in terms of nodes. So there are two types of nodes in n8n. There is the trigger node and there's a normal node. So a trigger node is usually shaped like that. There's a rounded corner at the beginning, just signifying that this is the start, right? This is the start. This is why it's rounded. Now, a normal node, you can see here, it's just a normal node with like a full square edges around the whole thing. That's a normal node, right? As you can see, the difference between a trigger node and a normal node. A trigger node looks like a start of a node and it doesn't have any input, right? You cannot put input to it. Like, for example, if I copy this here and put it next to a trigger node here, as you can see here, this is a rounded, so this is a start. It doesn't have one of these inputs here, right? This is an input, so you can feed this into this, right? This is an input, but a trigger node does not have an input. And this is the big major difference about it, because it has a lightning bolt here at the start, meaning it triggers. This is a trigger node, okay? And another thing I want to explain is connecting nodes. As you can see, every node has an input and has an output. As an input and as an output, the normal node, okay? Now, to connect two nodes, you just click on the plus icon, drag that line, and you release it at the input. And bam, now this is connected. Both of these nodes are connected through this line. Now, this line, I can delete it. Now they're no longer connected, and I can connect it back. And I can add, so I can add in between nodes here. So I can add whatever in between node I want. Here, let's go to the code node. As you can see here, it inserted a node right in between both of these. Now I can disconnect and then connect again. Okay? Now, the node, as they are connected, usually n8n and most cases run from left to right. So from this node to this node, this direction, it goes from left to right throughout all the nodes. But it also goes vertically. So if I have two vertical nodes above each other, right, like here, and if I connect both of these nodes, n8n will go top to bottom, right? Top to bottom and left to right. Always have that in mind. Left to right and top to bottom. This is how n8n executes the nodes as it goes through the automation. All right. So one other thing as well, any node can be connected to not just one, but two nodes. As you can see here, and more, plus you can connect as much as you want, right? And how this runs is the output of this node goes first to the top node because it runs first top, and then the output goes to the bottom node, which is the second node here. Okay, top to bottom. Any node can be connected to several nodes. All right. Now, every node can be deactivated. Just by right-clicking on the node, you can deactivate, and you can see it went gray, and there's deactivated. What does that mean? It means it's no longer active. So if this workflow runs, it will skip this node as if it doesn't exist. All right? And the shortcut is P to deactivate. Now, to activate, sorry. Now to activate is D. So P, sorry. Deactivate is D. So D, not P. So D to activate and D to deactivate, okay? D is the shortcut to activate and deactivate. Now, what other? We can duplicate a node. and we can rename a node, and we can execute only this step. So if I don't want to execute all of these nodes, I can just execute one of them. It's just execute step. Now, some nodes, especially further along in your way, you'll do the loop over node. If you execute anything inside of the loop over node, it will execute the whole loop because it needs to do the whole loop to understand what's going on. But individual nodes like these, you can execute this step on its own. Okay. Now, as we said, any node has an input and an output, and you can see it here. You can see here input, and you can see here output as well. And if I execute this step, it has to run this the previous step and the last step now, but this can also run on its own. So if I don't have anything connected to this and I hit execute, it will also execute this node. Okay. But I have a manual trigger. If I execute, it tells me the input was a manual execution, so nothing, no fields is in there, but it has an output, and the output has all of these variables that I want. Now, the output has a schema table and JSON. These are just the way you view the output, but the output is the same. Okay, schema is a very user-friendly way to just see all of the output in a very visually friendly way, but they also have a table, and you also have a JSON, which not so many people prefer. All right, so I just wanted to go over some of these basics on nodes and how to connect them and how it runs before we start explaining more of these nodes. Now, I just want to say one more thing is that if you want an in-depth course about all of this, I have inside of my YouTube channel here, I have an n8n full course, which is 6 hours long. So, and I'll go over these nodes and all of the other nodes as well. So it's just an essential course that you can go through. All right, let's just jump right into today's lesson. Today we're going to go some of the essential nodes. Now there's a lots of nodes in here inside of n8n, lots and lots and lots of nodes. Do you use them all in all of your workflows? I guess not. I mean, for me, I don't use them all in all of my workflows. I use some of the most essential ones, and I find myself using those ones more and more and more often. And most of the workflows, you'll go ahead with these essential nodes unless you have a specific workflow that requires a specific API call for a specific service, then you'd use some of those nodes. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start with the most essential ones, which are the trigger nodes. So the trigger nodes are the nodes that start every workflow. So it's step number one. Okay, it's what gets the workflow started. It's what gets the automation started. And every workflow needs a trigger. It needs a trigger. So by the meaning of it, an automation is a process that gets done on its own automatically, right? And for it to start, you need a trigger. You need a step one for it to start. Now, there are several types of trigger, as you can see here in front of you. Those are the most basic ones, like the essential ones. Of course, with every API, you have a trigger. So, for example, Google Sheets have a trigger. Airtable has a trigger. Lots of APIs have their own triggers. Okay, so let's get started. So the first one is the manual one. So this is very important for when you're testing out workflows, for when you're building out workflows. This one only gets started if you hit execute workflow. The moment you execute workflow is the moment that this trigger starts. Now, if you have a manual one, you cannot turn this on because the active and inactive state is only for automation that run on a schedule or with Webhook or with form or with an external trigger. But for manual ones, by definition, you need to click that in order for it to start. Okay, this is why we have the manual one. It's great for testing. I use that for testing or for workflows that I just need to go ahead and I trigger it myself. Okay, now you can click this button to run, or you can click this button. But now, since I have several triggers, I get the chance to select which one. So if I click this one, then I click run, then it will run this one. Okay. Because now this is the recent feature where you choose what trigger if you have multiple. So this is the manual one. So the schedule one is one of the most useful and most used ones, because by definition, an automation runs automatically and usually runs automatically on schedule. And if you click on this, you get so many options here. You can run it every second, every minute, or every. So if I choose minute, I can choose the interval between each. So every 5 minutes or every 1 minute, etc. You have when you choose days, then you could choose at what time of the day you want it to run. Okay. But also, one of the most important ones is CRON. So CRON is a way for you to write an expression in order for you to get an expression. For example, here they say example 0, 15, star 1. So you have the format of seconds, minute, hour, day of the month, day of the week. Now, you don't need to write that on your own. You can go ahead to ChatGPT and tell it to write me a cron expression that I can use in n8n that would run this workflow and you specify, and then it gives you just, and you paste it here. Cron is very, very reliable, and I use it a lot when I'm doing a schedule. Okay. So that's the schedule trigger. The next one is the form trigger. So the form trigger basically is a way for you to have a form that users can fill out. Now, if I click here, so I have this, this is the test URL. So as long as you're testing, use this one. And whenever you want to switch to production, meaning when you want to turn this workflow to active, you need the production one. Okay. Test one are only for testing purposes inside of the workflow. Now you have the form title. You can add content here. For example, you can add text, you can add a drop down, you can add an email field, you can build out your form the way that you'd like. And as soon as you finish, you turn on production. Now you can add authentication in case you do not want anyone to access this form. So once you add an authentication, then this form only gets triggered with people who have the credentials for that. Okay. So that's the form. Here we have the webhook. So webhook is also one of the essential ones. So a webhook is a way for you to trigger an automation externally. Now you have several types of method. You have get, post, delete, and patch, and put. All of those are relevant, but the most important ones are the get and the post. So what that means is I can trigger this workflow to start using a browser, using an external service, using even from your iPhone. You can trigger this workflow to run. I have a separate video on my webhooks you can check out on my YouTube channel. Okay. So these are the main triggers. So manual, schedule, form, and webhook. So moving on to data transformation, which is way we transform data, and data is very, very important inside of n8n. So some of the basic ones, basic node is the edit fields, or some people call it the set or set variable. So this is a way for you to create new variables. So you have two modes. You have manual and you have JSON. Okay. Now JSON tends to be a bit scary, especially for people like me, the ones who don't know coding. But the manual one is the most one I use. So you can name the variable. You can name it first name, for example, and then write the name of the variable. And if you execute this step, you'll have first name Jack. Now, if I go to JSON here, I can see how it's written inside of JSON. Okay, you can view it in several types. Now I can add as many as I want, and I could choose what type of variable that I want. And I have a lesson about type of variables in case you want to go into that more. All right, so this is one of the most essential nodes. It's for you to for example, alter data that you're getting. It's for you to create new data. For example, I could put in my API key for any of the workflow and I can use it across all of the workflow and reference that. I want to also show you the other type here. We have a JSON example. So instead of using manual, I'm going to use JSON, and I have this JSON test that I have here. If I execute this, it will give me also a series of data that I wrote here. Now, you don't necessarily need to know how to write JSON, but as you go ahead and work with n8n and work with automations, you get more familiar with JSON and how a JSON is structured, and you'll be able to write your own at the end of it. Okay, as soon as you create 100+ workflows, you will be more familiar with JSON. So you can do the manual one, which is the user-friendly one, or you can do the JSON. So for example, I have data here coming in, and I want to go over the code node. And the code node is a very powerful node because you can run JavaScript inside of it. And I don't know JavaScript, and I bet you don't know either. But in case you know, great. But in case you're like me, you don't know how to code, I use just most of the time I use ChatGPT for that. So I have here a JSON example. I'm going to connect it to this Google, this code node, and this just has a list of employees from their location and their permissions. Okay, I go to ChatGPT here and I tell it, can you write me an n8n code node that takes the following JSON, and I give it example of the JSON, and I want only give me back the email and the name of the employees from Sweden with delete permission. Then look at that. It gives me all the code. I don't need to understand it. I don't need to go through. Of course, I'm welcome to do that, but in case I don't want that, it's totally fine. So I can go to here and I just paste this. And if I run this, and then I come here and I run this, look at that. It gives me Liam and the email. It gives me exactly what I want, the name and the email of the person that is from Sweden and with the delete as false. So this is a great way. Lots of people use AI agents for some of the steps in their workflows like this. And it's just a waste of money and a waste of effort. You can do that in a code node. A code node can get you all the way through most of the issues if you use it wisely, and you don't need to use AI agent. Keep the AI agent for anything that is creative or anything that the code node cannot do. All right. So the filter is also a very important node. It just filters out the things that you want. For example, I can filter out so let's say location is equal to Sweden, right? And if I execute this step, we can see that it kept one, which is Jake here. Okay, so it went through, it did one, which is the employee named Jay because he's the first one, and the location of the first one is actually from Sweden. Okay. Now, as you can see, this runs without a trigger. If I connect the trigger to this and I say run on, and I click, now it just, you can use this button. As I said before, it ran with this and gives me all of the employees inside of an array, and here it outputs. Now, in case you're wondering why it did return only one and not two, because I have several from Sweden, it's because this is an array and I'm specifying that I want only the array number 0, which is the first one. Now, in case you want to go through every one of those, that's easy, which takes us to our next step here, which is the split. The split is a great way to split an array. So if I connect this to here and I say I want to split this array, and I give it the name of the array here, and I execute, now I have 4 items for every employee, right? If you can see here, I had 1 item, and now it's 4 items. Now, since it's 4 items, any node that comes after that will run 4 times. And be careful of that. This can be very beneficial in times, but this can be also very costly in times. You need to know how many items. Imagine I have now 1,000 items coming up, and I wasn't aware of that, and I connected to an AI agent. Now, the AI agent will run 1,000 times. Now, be careful, because that kind of mistakes is just very costly one. Now, if I run this again, as you can see here, if I go to the kept, now I have discarded 4, because I did not put it the right way, so I need to remove this. Now I need to put the location here as it is. Now I have 2 kept and 2 discarded. 2 kept are the one from Sweden, and 2 discarded are not the one, because based on the condition that I have. Now I have a string which is equal to, I can specify it to contain, I can use regex, which is the regular expression. I can use a lot of things, okay? So filter node, just what it outputs is here 2 items. So it only has the kept and the discarded. The discarded does not continue throughout the path, but the kept gets to continue, okay? Now, the aggregate node, as you can see here, the shape of these nodes, they are similar, but they are just flipped. And this is exactly why, because this takes an array and explodes it into several items, and this takes several items and makes them as one array. So if you use both of these together, as you can see here, we started with 1, we have multiple, then we'll take the multiple and we'll go ahead and make it 1. And here you can put all items or individual fields, but we can say all items, and then we're back at having 1 item here. Now, this is also good, is when you have several items and you do not want to end up with the mistakes that I mentioned before with a node executing 1,000 times. Now you can put an aggregate, and just it puts everything into one node, okay? Now this is aggregate. And in case you're a make user, this is similar to iterate and aggregate, but the iterate is now called the split out inside of n8n. Now the merge node, as it says, in case you have several paths coming in and you want to merge them into one path, the merge node is exactly for that. You can specify how many you want, and you can have as many as you want. Now for the action that you want, it can do append, it can do combine, it can do very, very complex things. But for most cases, you would use append and combine. Append just appends them together, output each items one after the other, okay? But combine, it combines them into one output, okay? Okay, so the next one is the switch. Now, the switch is a conditional node. Now, the reason why I put switch and I did not put if, and there is an if node, because basically switch does exactly what if does, plus so many other things. So for me, it's better for me to use a switch node, and it's easier. For example, I have the switch, and I can rename the output to true, and I can rename the second output to false. Sorry. False. And as you can see now, this looks more like an if node, okay? And I can even have more routes, and I can specify. And here I specify the value, and here the condition. So here we have conditions based on variable types. If it's a string, the condition change. If it's a number, the condition change. If it's a Boolean, the condition changes. So I advise you, and I encourage you to study more about variables in order to use those wisely, okay? And with a switch node, you can add as many conditions as you want. Of course, it caps out at the end, but you can wire it up to another switch node. All right. So here it just grows like that. The second one is the wait node, and this is a very important node, because during the workflows that you will be creating, you need times to wait, because sometimes API would stop you or trigger an error if you're requesting too much time. And this one, if you put a wait node in between, it will just fix a lot of those issues, and it will give you the time for like you can specify how many seconds, how many minutes, how many hours, and how many days. I rarely use days, but the option is there. And you have after an interval time, specific time, on webhook call, or on form submitted. Okay, so many options with the wait node. Very important one. Now the HTTP request node, and this I don't think I can cover it all now, but I have a specific lesson. I think it's more than 20 minutes covering the HTTP request because it's such an essential node, especially with n8n and automation, because you're basically calling out other services, other APIs, and the way to do that is usually with an HTTP request node, unless they have their own node. For example, Google Sheet has their own node here. You don't have to do it with HTTP, but you can do it with an HTTP request. But in case you don't find the service that you want or the tool that you want, it doesn't have a node here, then you are more likely to do an HTTP request, which is basically either a GET or a POST. That's the most common ones. And then you would put your endpoint here. So if it's a GET, it will just retrieves the information for you for you and put it here. And if it's a POST, you'll be sending information. And if it is a POST, it's usually with a body. Okay, you specify what you want, because posting is you sending information, and when you send information, you need something. You need to send something. Okay, and usually there's authentication if it's a service, and you need to define your authentication here because most of the services need to verify that you're a user and verify the requests that you're making. Okay, so you need a credential, either an API key, or every service has their own type of API. I have more comprehensive overview on APIs inside of my community, inside of the documentation section. There's a specific section for APIs that I'll explain more about that. Now, in terms of data, we have, I put here Google Sheets or the data tables. Now, Google Sheets, before data table even existed, and this is a new feature like 4 weeks ago, I think, a couple of weeks ago. Usually, data sheets are the Google Sheets are the most used one. It's because it's available for everyone. It's free, and it gives you all the capabilities that you want. I mean, sure, it has some of its issues and problems, but it did the job. But with the recent addition of data tables, now you have specific tables inside of n8n, and that reduces a lot of the problems. Now that you can get data. For example, here I'm inserting, but if I want to get, basically I can get all the rows here. If I execute this step, it just gets all of the rows that I have inside of my table, right? And it's much faster, right? And it's much easier, and it's much more convenient. It doesn't do any external API call. It's within. So it's less likely to give you any headache with rate limiting or with any issue. Now, Google Sheet, as I'm sure you guys know it all, is just very, very useful one, a very visual one. The databases exist on your drive, on your Google account, and then you can connect to it via Google Auth. In case you don't know what Google Auth is, I have also an in-depth way for you to set up Google Auth. Basically, what Google Auth is authenticating Google, because sometimes it can get a bit hard. Here, you need just to create new credentials, and there's a step-by-step workflow on how to connect to Google. And once you connect, you can get all your data. I want to just cover a little bit about the AI agent here. So very, very, very famous node. It's one of the nodes that got n8n very popular at the beginning, because Make didn't have an AI agent node. So an AI agent node, you can just have it from here, AI, and put AI agent. And this gives you this node, which with a lot of, I added some of those, but usually, yeah, you would end up with a couple of outputs. So it has an output here, it has an input, and it has a chat model, memory, tool, and output parser. So in order for you to make this working, the first thing you do always is you put a brain to it. And the brain is a model. Now you can have an OpenRouter, and I do advise you to use an OpenRouter because basically an OpenRouter is an account that has all of the AI models that are available now in one place. So you can put some money in there and then use every AI model that you want. You don't have to create an account for each of those APIs, each of those API companies. You can have one which has everything, and you would just have one place that you can monitor all of your uses, all of the load, and all of the costs, which is the OpenRouter one. I have a lesson inside of my community on how to set up OpenRouter in case you're interested. So you just connect that here. Now, in case you can click here and you can find it here as well. Okay, same thing. Now, what you would do here is as you can see here, all of the AI models, most of them, I would say here. There's even free ones here you can choose from. So that's one. The second one is the memory. Now, you don't have to use this. See, the error went off because the most essential node is the brain of it, which is the model. The memory, you can use a simple memory, which is inside of n8n, which gives you 5, I think, to 10 steps. But in case you want to use an external memory, you can also use that. You can use Google Sheets, you can use Postgres, you can use whatever you want. Now, I will skip the tool now, but the output parser is also very important, which is this one. So the output parser, usually it's not present, but once you toggle this one, require a specific output, it just gives you this output. And this is very important in case you want a specific output for your model. Because sometimes each time the AI model gives you an output of a certain way or a certain shape, and you don't want that because you want the next step to be expecting a certain variable, certain structure. And if every time you have a different structure, your automation will always error. And this is a good step. This is an excellent step for you to come here and you would say, generate from example. Just so you give an example. I am expecting the AI model to give me state cities with these example values. And then the AI model looks at this and outputs something in the structure of this every time. Okay. Now you can choose define with schema. Okay. And this is a bit harder, but this can be also generated with ChatGPT, where you can tell it, this is an example of how I want the JSON to be. Give me the JSON schema of that. And then you can paste it here and you will be all good. This is very, very important. Will save you a lot of headache. Now, the last one is the tool. Now, there's lots of tools here, but you're free to check them out and try them out. But these are tools specific to specific use cases. But most of the AI agents would run on a brain, maybe memory sometimes, and a structured output parser. All right. So I'm nearing a half an hour of this video. I wanted to go over some of the basics. I hope this lesson was beneficial to you guys. In case you did find it useful, give it a like, subscribe for more videos, and check out my community. I hope I see you there. See you in the next one.